Really quick, before we get into the video, this is your last chance to enter the Toyota Starlet giveaway. That also means you don't have to hear me talk about it anymore. I'm working with Fathom, a veteran and family-owned business. They've worked with Hoovy's Garage and Auto Auction Rebuilds, who I'm sure you know. On screen is the QR code. Get your phones out, scan it, and boom, you are there. There will be links in the description. The last day is February 22nd. Get yourself some limited time merchandise. You're supporting me as a creator. Now on to the video. I'm going to be real with myself. I don't expect this video to do well. I don't know, it might, but this is a topic I've personally wanted to go over for some time now. I'm not your conventional car guy, if you will. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love sports cars. I just like the more mundane stuff, and I feel like a lot of my audience is the same way. This video will go over some specific models from the 2000s from Isuzu, and I'm telling you right now, the technology and innovation that they had during this time was completely slept on. It's going to be my job to shed some light on it, and I have timestamps in the description. All of my videos do, to make it easy to jump around if you want. Isuzu has always been about go anywhere, do anything. And in the 1990s and 2000s, they were thinking outside the box. The Rodeo and Trooper were solid cars for the time, maybe not the most comfortable, but capable and pretty reliable, which is how I see Isuzu. I feel like many of their cars are, or should I say were, this way. The Rodeo and Amigo are highly respected by their owners. You go to Motor Week's video on them, and it's nothing but positive feedback. I've always had a thing for the Rodeo. I like the way it looks. It is older in design, especially as the years progressed. I mean, even when it came out, it looked a little outdated, but that's part of what makes them unique. That's not to mention their four-wheel drive system, which was excellent, and it still is. Great off-road SUVs. I should backtrack just a little. They stopped selling sedans here in the States in 1993 with the Stylus. Fun fact about the Stylus, there was this 1 year only RS trim, and they came with Lotus tuned suspension along with a whole bunch of upgrades over base models. Cool cars in my opinion. Then of course there was the Impulse and iMark, but I believe that's it when it comes to non-SUVs and trucks. And that's the thing, the majority of their sales were SUVs and trucks. Not to discredit those cars just mentioned, this is just what they were really good at. They had strong ties with General Motors, especially during the 90s and 2000s. You got the Ombre, which was a rebadge S10, the Ascender, which was a rebadge GMT 360, and of course, the I-Series. Speaking of rebadges, this was another huge thing with Isuzu. You have the Oasis, which was a rebadge Odyssey, Acura SLX, which was a Trooper, and Honda Passport, which was a rebadge of the Rodeo. Honda and Isuzu made an agreement in 1993 where Honda would be able to sell SUVs in the North American market. This partnership would of course end in 2002 when Honda developed the Pilot and MDX. As for GM, by 1998, they owned 49% of Isuzu, which is a lot higher of a percentage than I initially thought. To add, Subaru and Isuzu had a joint plant in Lafayette. They had rebadged Subarus in Japan. There's that Lotus connection as well, and that's not including whatever they had going on with their commercial vehicles. I'm sure what I just said is nothing new, pretty basic stuff, but nothing wrong with a nice little refresh, and it also just goes to show like this smorgasbord of companies involved with Isuzu. So let's get to the main point, and that's going to be the VehiCROSS, but more importantly, the Axiom, and maybe I'll talk about the Ascender and iMark series. If we look at this 2002 sales brochure, we can see the lineup, and it almost looks familiar with modern manufacturers, no sedans or wagons, at least domestically. And you might be wondering, well, where the hell is this VehiCROSS? And as it turns out, those ended production in 2001. They were introduced in the North American market in '99, And yeah, just very short-lived production. Less than 4,200 units were sold, which is not too great. Some other SUVs from the time sold around that number in 1 or 2 months. Just for a comparison, in 2001, these cost more than a Trooper S with 4x4 and almost the same price as the LS, a trim higher, and nowhere near as practical. However, I don't think it's fair to compare the two. The VehiCROSS was never this family-oriented SUV like the Trooper was. That was never its role. From the outside, super polarizing. These aggressive body lines, short overhangs, lots of cladding, and from the concept unveiled in 1993, no drastic changes were made, which is not very common. These, of course, had that advanced torque-on-demand four-wheel drive system. It could predict potential slippage. It had 12 independent sensors to monitor wheel speed, throttle position, and vehicle speed every few milliseconds. Just super solid system from Isuzu. What was powering the VehiCROSS? It was a 3.5-liter V6 producing about 215 horsepower and 230 pound-feet of torque, made it to a 4-speed automatic. These cars have such a cult following. I mean, look at it. To me, I think they're ugly, but in a good way. Shout out to VehiCROSS owners, the very few of you guys. One of the strangest cars to come out of the late 90s to early 2000s. A year after the cancellation of the VehiCROSS came the Axiom. And it's actually crazy how slept on of a SUV this was, especially for the time. The Axiom was intended to replace the Trooper as this all-new flagship and serve as their answer to the rising popularity of car-based SUVs like the Toyota Highlander and Subaru Outback. The irony is that while it was aimed directly at that soft-roader suburban crossover buyer, the Axiom underneath is pretty much all truck. It rides on a body-on-frame platform derived from the rodeo and retains off-road hardware like 8-frame cross members, a torsion bar front suspension with a stabilizer, and a coil spring rear setup, which I guess does differ from the conventional leaf springs seen on a truck. So, Isuzu did the only thing they really could. They stacked every electronic upgrade in their arsenal on top of it to make it feel like a car. Torque on-demand four-wheel drive, kind of like a modern all-wheel drive system we see today, but could go into low-range gearing. There's traction control, stability systems, active damping with 17 levels, all of this to make it behave more like a Highlander than a Trooper. Reviewers consistently noted that it drove more like a modern SUV than a traditional off-roader, which is exactly what they were going for. I think this was a good move on Isuzu's end. I'm sure some will disagree with that. Yes, it is not your typical Isuzu that's rough and tough, but the market was changing. You know, why pretend you're going to go rock climbing or off-roading when you're really just going to Target or you're going to soccer practice? Power came from that same V6, initially rated at around 230 horsepower, later bumped to around 250, and was paired with a GM 4-speed automatic transmission. Okay, so we know all about this thing, the inner workings of this car, probably too much information. How about the styling? And that's where things get controversial. I personally think that the front end is actually weirdly forward thinking. The cat eye headlights, if you will, the tall grille, the vertical louvers, it has presence. You can see the early version of what modern SUVs would become, not all of them, but some of them, big faces, slim lights, upright proportions. From the side, I guess it works. From the rear, it's a little awkward, but not bad looking by any means. How about the interior? And yeah, it was not bad either, especially being an Isuzu. The interior was designed to look futuristic, featuring a centrally mounted integrated monitor system that controlled climate, audio, and trip data. XS models got leather seats and trim. The seats were power adjustable. It looks nice. I will say though that the rear seat space was 100% an afterthought. The split folding bench uses the old 3-step process. Remove headrests, lift the cushions, fold the seat backs, and legroom is tight for a vehicle of its size. Minus that though, everything else about this car was good. However, when it came to your average consumer, who the hell is going to an Isuzu dealership? It didn't matter how nice and advanced these were, people were going elsewhere. You know, Isuzu, in a lot of ways, was like International Harvester, incredible at building trucks, industrial equipment, and commercial vehicles, but just a little too rough around the edges when it came to normal consumer cars. The Axiom was Isuzu trying to change that, and I actually think these were nice, but no, it did not matter. Only about 25,000 Axioms were sold over 3 years, and by 2007, Isuzu was selling just 7,000 vehicles total in the US, about 2 cars per dealership per month. Compared to the Trooper and Rodeo, I'm not sure what those sales numbers were, I'll have them on screen, but yeah, I mean, you can really see the difference. There's currently one Axiom for sale, at least on Car Gurus. Guys, I really want it, but it's super far away. I did transport my last car from New Mexico to Florida, so I kind of know what to do, but I don't know, I've been saving for something else. If you've owned one or even still do, let me know your thoughts on them, especially when it comes to reliability, and just maybe I'll pull the trigger. The last 2 cars we got here in the States from Isuzu was the I-Series, the 290 and 370, and the Ascender. Of the GMT 360s, these are the most forgotten and worst selling, only about 8,000 units sold from 2003 to 2008. These also had an extended version, even more rare. Not every GMT 360 did, but it was canceled before the car was gone entirely. You have a slightly different front and rear as all the other GMT 360s. I think the vents, like the AC vents inside, were slightly different, but mechanically identical. As for the I-Series, initially they were sold as the i280 and i350, i280 having a 2.84 cylinder and the i350 having a 3.5 V6. 1 year later, GM upgraded both engines and they were now the i290 and i370. This is actually pretty interesting, but unlike the Ascender and Ombre, these trucks were heavily designed in and out by Isuzu. Yes, they used GM engines and transmissions, but a lot of the existence of the Colorado and Canyon are based on Isuzu. To wrap up Isuzu's last 2 models sold here, if you want to be different, get an I-Series or an Ascender. I don't see Isuzu as a crappy brand. Maybe you do, maybe most consumers might. I'm willing to bet that's the case. But for me, if I had to pick between a Colorado and i370, give me the Isuzu. Screw it. It's rare, it's unique, and it's quirky. I feel like I had more energy at the beginning of this video. Sorry if my voice started to die out. But yeah, that's all I have for this week's episode. And thank you for making it to this point of the video. Thanks to my continued subscribers for being here. You know who you are. Let me know in the comments what you think of any of the cars in this video. And with that said, enjoy the rest of your week, and I will really try and see you all in 2 weeks.